Lieutenant Maya Chun had spent 4 years aboard the UES Avalon, and she had never once seen actual combat in all that time. Her job was simple and boring and safe, which was exactly how she liked it. Every morning she would wake up at 600 hours, put on her crisp blue logistics uniform, and walk down to Cargo Base 7, where her desk waited for her like an old friend. She processed requisition forms, and she routed cargo containers, and she made sure that spare engine parts reached the right ships at the right time. It was not glamorous work, but someone had to do it, and Maya was very good at it. The Avalon was massive, a carrier ship that stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, and it served as a mobile supply hub for the entire Terran expeditionary fleet. Thousands of soldiers passed through its corridors every week, heading out to fight the Vrakthi on dozens of different worlds. But Maya rarely spoke to any of them. She lived in a world of inventory numbers and shipping manifests and cargo tracking codes. The war against the Vrakthi Dominion had been going on for 11 years now, and humanity was slowly winning, pushing the alien empire back system by system. Maya had seen plenty of Vrakthi in training halls during her basic orientation. Tall reptilian creatures with 4 arms and teeth like broken glass. But she had never encountered one in person. She hoped she never would on the morning that changed everything. Maya was running late. She had stayed up too late the night before, trying to fix a discrepancy in the quartermaster database, and her alarm had failed to wake her. Now she was rushing through the corridors of the Tierdas of the Avalon with her coffee sloshing in its container and her datapad clutched under her arm. She needed to catch Shuttle 7 Alpha to Kepler Station, where a massive shipment of medical supplies was waiting to be cataloged and redirected. The hangar bay was chaos when she arrived. Dozens of shuttles were being prepped for launch, and Marines in heavy combat armor were jogging in formation toward their assigned craft. Maya squinted at the departure board, but the display was glitching, showing corrupted text instead of clear shuttle designations. She checked her datapad for her boarding assignment, but the screen was smudged with coffee, and the shuttle code was hard to read. It looked like 7 Delta, or maybe 7 Alpha. The 2 characters were so similar, and the smudge made it impossible to be certain. Maya made a choice, and she chose wrong. Shuttle 7 Delta was not a cargo transport heading to a peaceful supply depot. It was a rapid deployment craft loaded with Marines from the 45th Strike Battalion, and it was spinning up for an emergency combat drop to a planet called Nexion 4. Maya walked up the loading ramp and found a seat in the back corner without anyone stopping her. The Marines around her were checking their weapons and murmuring prayers and doing all the things soldiers do before they go to war. None of them looked at Maya twice. She was wearing a Terran uniform, and she had lieutenant bars on her collar, so they assumed she was supposed to be there. Maybe she was a last-minute replacement for a wounded officer. Maybe she was a specialist being attached to their unit. They did not ask, and Maya did not volunteer the truth, because she had not yet realized her mistake. The shuttle doors sealed with a heavy clunk and the engines began to roar. Maya felt the craft lift off the deck, and her stomach dropped as they accelerated toward the hangar exit. She looked out the small viewport beside her seat and watched the familiar interior of the Avalon fall away. That was when she saw the planet below them. It was not Kepler Station with its gleaming orbital rings and peaceful cargo platforms. It was a world wrapped in clouds of smoke and fire. A world where tiny flashes of light marked explosions and weapons fire across its entire surface. Maya's blood went cold. She grabbed the arm of the Marine sitting next to her, a young man with scared eyes and a rifle clutched tight against his chest. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The Marine looked at her like she had grown a second head. "Nexion 4, he said. "Firebase. Echo got overrun 6 hours ago, and we are the relief force." Maya opened her mouth to explain that there had been a terrible mistake, that she was just a logistics clerk who was supposed to be counting bandages on a space station. But the words died in her throat. The shuttle was already entering the atmosphere. Orange flames licked at the viewport as they plunged toward the planet's surface. There was no going back. Now Maya had read reports about Nexion 4. During her morning briefings, it was a jungle world. Hot and humid and full of dangerous native wildlife. The Terran forces had established a network of fire bases across the main continent to support their push against the Vrakthi supply lines. Firebase Echo was supposed to be one of the most secure positions on the planet. If it had fallen, then something had gone very wrong. The shuttle began to shake violently as anti-aircraft fire exploded around them. Maya gripped her seat, restrained so hard her knuckles turned white. The Marines around her were shouting now, calling out status reports and checking their gear one final time. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Calm, despite the chaos outside. 30 seconds to drop zone, weapons hot. May humanity endure. That last phrase was the traditional blessing of the Terran military, spoken before every battle since the first contact with the Vrakthi over a decade ago. Maya had heard it 1,000 times in movies and broadcasts, but she had never expected to hear it spoken for her. The shuttle lurched and the rear doors began to open. Hot jungle air rushed in, carrying with it the smell of burning vegetation and something else. Something sharp and chemical that made Maya's eyes water. The Marines rose from their seats in unison and charged down the ramp into the green hell waiting. Below, Maya sat frozen for one heartbeat. Then two, then three. A sergeant grabbed her arm and pulled her to her feet. Move it, Lieutenant. This bird is not staying on the ground. Maya moved. She ran down the ramp and her boots hit alien soil for the first time in her life. The jungle surrounded her on all sides. Massive trees with purple leaves that blocked out the sky. Vines as thick as her arm hanging everywhere like curtains. The sound of weapons fire echoed from every direction. She had no weapon, no armor, no training for this. She was a logistics clerk who had pressed the wrong button, and now she was standing in the middle of a war. The shuttle engines screamed behind her as the craft lifted off, leaving Maya and the Marines alone on a hostile world. She watched it rise into the smoke-filled sky and disappear. There was no going back. There was only forward. And forward meant survival. The drop zone was supposed to be secure. Intelligence reports had confirmed that Firebase Echo's eastern perimeter was still holding, and that Terran forces controlled a 3-kilometer radius around the landing site. Intelligence reports were wrong. The shuttle had barely touched down when the first plasma bolt screamed out of the jungle and punched through its starboard engine. Maya felt the impact like a giant fist, slamming into the craft, and then everything became chaos and noise and fire. Shuttle spun sideways, and the pilot tried to compensate, but there was no saving them now. They hit the ground at an angle, and the world became a tumbling nightmare of breaking metal and shattering glass and screaming soldiers. Maya was thrown from her seat despite the restraints, and she felt something in her wrist snap as she slammed against the bulkhead. Pain exploded up her arm. But she did not have time to scream because the shuttle was still moving, still rolling, still tearing itself apart around her. When everything finally stopped, Maya was lying on her back, staring up at a jagged hole in the hull where the ceiling used to be. Purple leaves swayed in the gap. Alien and strange against the smoke-filled sky, she could hear weapons fire in the distance. The sharp crack of Terran rifles mixing with the deeper boom of Vrakthi plasma weapons. She could hear screaming too. Human voices raised in pain and fear and desperate courage. Maya forced herself to move. Her left wrist was broken. She was certain of that. And her entire body felt like one massive bruise. Blood ran down her face from a cut on her forehead, and her vision swam with every movement. But she was alive. She was alive, and she needed to stay that way. The shuttle had scattered wreckage across a wide area, and Maya could see bodies among the debris. Some of them were moving, and some of them were not. She crawled toward the nearest survivor, a Marine who was trying to pull himself free from a tangle of safety webbing with one arm while the other hung limp at his side. It was Sergeant Okonkwo, a big man with dark skin and kind eyes, who had helped her off the shuttle just moments before. The world ended. His uniform was soaked with blood from dozens of shrapnel wounds, and his face was pale beneath its normal rich color. "Lieutenant," he gasped when he saw her, "you are alive." "Good, that is good." Maya helped him cut free from the webbing using a piece of broken metal, and together they stumbled away from the burning shuttle. They found 2 more survivors in the wreckage. Private First Class Reyes was a young woman barely out of training who sat beside a fallen tree with her knees pulled up to her chest and her eyes staring at nothing. She was in shock. Maya realized, her mind retreating from the horror around her into some safer place inside her own. Head Corporal Tanaka was worse off. The big Japanese man was pinned beneath a collapsed section of the shuttle's hull, and both his legs were trapped. Under the weight, he was conscious and alert, but there was no way to free him without equipment they did not have. "Leave me," Tanaka said when he saw them approach. "Get the others out of here before the Rakti come. Nobody is getting left behind." Maya said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. "We will figure something out." She did not know where that confidence came from. She was a logistics clerk, not a combat officer, and everything she knew about survival she had learned from training Hollis and adventure stories. But someone needed to take charge, and Okonkwo was barely standing, and Reyes was lost in her own mind, and Tanaka was trapped. That left Maya. She looked around the crash site with new eyes. Not the eyes of a terrified clerk, but the eyes of someone who needed to solve a problem. It was just like inventory management. She told herself you had resources and you had needs, and you had to figure out how to match them up. Their resources were limited. Okonkwo had his rifle, but only 2 magazines of ammunition remaining. Maya found a sidearm in the wreckage, a standard Terran pistol that she barely knew how to use, and she strapped it to her hip with her good hand. There were emergency supplies scattered around the crash site, ration packs and medical kits and flares and other equipment designed to help survivors last until rescue arrived. Their needs were more complicated. They needed to free Tanaka from the wreckage, and they needed to get Reyes functional again, and they needed to find a way to call for help because their military communications equipment had been destroyed in the crash. Most importantly, they needed to not die. The jungle around them was full of Rakthi hunters who had just watched the Terran shuttle go down and were certainly moving in to finish off any survivor. Okonkwo stumbled over to Maya and leaned against a tree for support. His breathing was ragged and his eyes were glassy with pain. "We are in trouble, Lieutenant," he said. "Firebase Echo is gone, which means the nearest friendly forces are at least 50 kilometers away. Our coms are dead, and I counted maybe 20 Rakthi in that ambush, which means there are probably 200 more nearby." "I know," Maya said. "You have a plan." Maya thought about all the cargo manifests she had processed over the years, all the emergency supply requests she had routed, all the distress calls she had logged from ships and stations in trouble. She thought about the shuttle's emergency beacon, a small device that was designed to survive crashes and broadcast a signal for rescue teams to follow. "Maybe," she said. "Help me find a beacon." They found it in the wreckage of the cockpit, a small orange box that was dented but still intact. Maya turned it over in her hands and studied the controls with the careful attention she usually reserved for shipping databases. It was a civilian model, she realized, the same type used by cargo haulers in the outer colonies. She had processed hundreds of distress calls from these beacons over her years in logistics. She knew their frequencies and their protocols and their quirks. More importantly, she knew that fleet logistics officers monitored a specific channel for priority cargo emergencies, a channel that military communications rarely used. If she could modify the beacon to broadcast on that frequency, then someone on the Avalon might hear it, someone like her replacement, sitting at her desk in Cargo Bay 7, watching the cargo tracking displays for anything unusual. "Sergeant," Maya said, I need you to buy me some time." Okonkwo looked at the beacon and then looked at Maya, and something in his eyes changed. It was respect. She realized, or maybe just desperate hope. "How much time?" he asked. "I do not know," Maya admitted. "As much as you can give me." The sergeant nodded and checked his rifle, and then limped toward the edge of the clearing where the jungle began. Then, "I will give you everything I have," he said. "Do not waste it, Lieutenant." Maya watched him disappear into the purple shadows, and then she got a work behind her. Tanaka groaned in pain, and Reyes continued to stare at nothing in the distance. The sounds of battle grew closer. The Vrakthi were coming, and Maya-chan, logistics clerk and accidental soldier, was the only thing standing between her people and death. Maya worked on the beacon with hands that would not stop shaking. Her broken wrist screamed with every movement, but she forced herself to ignore the pain and focus on the task in front of her. The emergency beacon was a simple device designed to broadcast a distress signal on standard military frequencies. But those frequencies were useless now. The Vrakthi had been jamming military communications across the entire sector for days, which was how they had managed to overrun Firebase Echo without anyone knowing until it was too late. But logistics channels were different. They operated on older frequencies that nobody thought to jam, because who would bother disrupting cargo manifests and shipping schedules? Maya knew those frequencies like she knew her own name. She had spent 4 years listening to them, routing calls through them, processing requests that came in on them at all hours of the day and night. If she could modify the beacon to broadcast on the priority cargo channel, then her signal might slip through the jamming. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot they had. The beacon's casing was dented from the crash, and Maya had to pry it open with a piece of broken metal from the shuttle wreckage inside. She found a tangle of wires and circuit boards that looked nothing like the neat diagrams in the technical manuals she had memorized years ago. But the basic principles were the same. Frequency was just a number, and numbers could be changed. If you knew what you were doing, Maya worked carefully, adjusting connections and rerouting power and whispering prayers to whatever gods might be listening. In the distance, she could hear Okonkwo's rifle firing in short, controlled bursts. He was engaging the Vrakthi scouts, drawing their attention away from the crash site, buying her the time she needed. She hoped it would be enough. While she worked, Maya tried to keep an eye on the others. Reyes was still sitting where they had found her, arms wrapped around her knees. Eyes seeing nothing. Tanaka was drifting in and out of consciousness, the pain from his crushed legs pulling him under and then releasing him again in waves. Neither of them could help her. Neither of them could fight. If the Vrakthi got past Okonkwo, then Maya would be the last line of defense, and she had never fired a weapon in combat in her entire life. She pushed that thought away and focused on the beacon. Fear was a luxury she could not afford right now. An hour passed, and then another. The sounds of fighting grew closer, and then farther away, and then closer again, as Okonkwo played a deadly game of cat and mouse with the Vrakthi hunters. Maya finished her modifications just as the sun began to set. The jungle was growing dark around her, purple shadows stretching across the clearing like grasping fingers. She held the beacon up and studied her work with critical eyes. It was ugly, a mess of exposed wires and jury-rigged connections that would make any proper engineer weep. But it should work. It had to work. Maya activated the beacon and spoke into its tiny microphone. "This is Lieutenant Maya Chun of the U.E.S. Avalon calling on priority cargo. Channel 773. We have stranded assets at the following coordinates requiring immediate retrieval. 4 survivors with critical injuries and no military communications capability. Vrakthi forces are closing on our position, and we will not last through the night without support. Please respond." She repeated the message 3 times and then set the beacon to loop automatically. Now all she could do was wait and prepare for the worst. Maya turned her attention to their defensive position. She was not a soldier, but she was very good at managing resources, and right now resources were all they had. She inventoried everything in the crash site with the same careful attention she would give to a cargo manifest. 3 flares that could be used to signal for help or to create diversions. 2 emergency blankets made of reflective material that could confuse. Rakthi thermal sensors. 1 fire extinguisher that was still pressurized and could be used as a weapon in close quarters. 6 ration packs that nobody was hungry enough to eat. A medical kit that she used to splint her broken wrist and bandage Okonkwo's wounds when he stumbled back into the clearing an hour later. I killed 4 of them, the sergeant reported as Maya wrapped his injuries. But there are more coming. Many more. I saw at least 30 moving through the jungle to the north. Then we need to be ready for them, Maya said. She spent the next several hours turning the crash site into a fortress. She positioned Tanaka behind a fallen tree where he could see the main approach from the north, and she put his rifle in his hands even though he could barely stay conscious. She snapped Ray is out of her shock by speaking to her in the calm, steady voice she used when training new clerks in the logistics department. Private, I need you to focus. I need you to be present. I need you to help me save your friends. Something in those words reached Reyes through the fog in her mind. She blinked and looked at Maya, and slowly the emptiness in her eyes was replaced by something hotter. What do you need me to do, Lieutenant? She asked. Maya had her dig trenches and build barricades and set up trip lines using wire salvaged from the shuttle wreckage. She positioned the flares at key points around their perimeter where they could be triggered to blind any attackers. She used her knowledge of Rakthi supply patterns, gleaned from years of intercepted cargo manifests that passed through her department, to predict which directions they would most likely attack. From the Rakthi were methodical creatures who always approached targets from positions that maximized their supply line access. It was a weakness that Terran commanders exploited whenever they could, and now Maya would exploit it too. By midnight, their little camp was as fortified as she could make it. Okonkwo looked at her preparations with something like wonder in his pain-filled eyes. Where did you learn to do this, Lieutenant? He asked. They do not teach this in logistics training. Maya thought about all the years she had spent studying cargo flows and supply chains and the movement of resources across the galaxy. She thought about how war was really just a very complicated logistics problem with people instead of packages. They teach it, she said. They just call it something different. The beacon continued to broadcast its distress call into the night. Maya sat with her back against a tree and her pistol in her lap and waited for the Rakthi to come somewhere. Out there in the darkness, she could hear them moving, branches snapping and leaves rustling as they surrounded the crash site. They were patient hunters who preferred to strike at dawn when their prey was tired and vulnerable. Maya would not give them that advantage. She would not sleep tonight. She would not rest. She would watch and wait, and when they came, she would fight with everything she had, because that was what humans did. They survived. They adapted. They refused to die. The night stretched on, and Maya Chun kept her vigil a logistics clerk holding the line against an alien army. It should have been absurd. It should have been impossible. But Maya had spent her whole career making the impossible happen, one requisition form at a time. This was just another problem to solve, another shipment to deliver, another job to finish, and Maya Chun always finished her jobs. The Rakthi attacked at dawn, just as Maya had predicted. The first wave came from the north. 6 hunters moving through the purple jungle with the fluid grace of natural predators. They were tall creatures, nearly 2.5 meters in height, with scaled skin, the color of whetstone, and 4 arms that ended in claws like curved knives. Their eyes glowed faintly in the early morning light, adapted for hunting in darkness, and their teeth were visible even with their mouths closed. Maya had seen them in training halls, but nothing had prepared her for the reality. They were terrifying. They were death-given form, and they were coming. Straight for her people, Tanaka saw them. First, an open fire from his position behind the fallen tree. His shots were wild and unsteady, his aim ruined by pain and blood loss. But he managed to hit one of the hunters in the shoulder and send it stumbling back into the jungle. The other 5 scattered and disappeared into the undergrowth like smoke. "They are flanking us," Okonkwo shouted from his position on the eastern side of the camp. "I can hear them moving through the brush." Maya forced herself to think the Vrakthi were testing their defenses, probing for weaknesses, looking for the best angle of attack. They did not know how few defenders they faced or how poorly armed those defenders were. That ignorance was the only advantage Maya had, and she intended to use it. Reyes. She called out, "Trigger, Flare 1." Now, Reyes pulled the wire, and a brilliant white light exploded on the northern perimeter. The magnesium flare was designed to signal rescue aircraft, but at close range, it was blinding. Especially the creatures with eyes adapted for darkness. Maya heard the Vrakthi hunters screech in pain as the light seared their sensitive vision. "Move," she ordered. "Tanaka, give me covering fire. Okonkwo, fall back to position 2. Reyes with me." They had rehearsed this during the night, running through scenarios and practicing movements until everyone knew their role. Maya had organized it like a cargo rotation schedule, breaking complex actions down into simple steps that even injured and exhausted soldiers could follow. The Vrakthi recovered faster than she expected. 2 of them burst through the undergrowth on the western side of the camp, their claws extended and their jaws open in silent screams of Rage. Okonkwo caught one of them with a burst from his rifle, and it went down thrashing. Other kept coming. Maya raised her pistol and fired. Miss. She fired again and missed again. A Vrakthi was almost on top of her now, close enough that she could smell its breath, a mixture of copper and something sour that made her stomach turn. She fired a 3rd time, and this shot hit home, punching through the creature's chest and spraying dark blood across the jungle floor. The Vrakthi staggered but did not fall. It reached for her with 2 of its arms, and Maya threw herself backward, tripping over a root and landing hard on her broken wrist. Pain exploded through her body, and her vision went white. When she could see again, the Vrakthi was standing over her, wounded but still alive, its claws raised for a killing blow. Maya did the only thing she could think of. She grabbed the fire extinguisher she had placed beside her position, and she swung it at the creature's head with every ounce of strength she had left. The impact made a sound like a wet melon hitting concrete. The Vrakthi dropped. Maya lay on the ground, gasping for breath, staring at the dead alien beside her, unable to believe what she had just done. She had killed a Vrakthi warrior in hand-to-hand combat with a fire extinguisher. Nobody was ever going to believe this. "Lieutenant," Reyes shouted, more coming from the south. Maya forced herself to stand. Her wrist was screaming. Her whole body was shaking, and she wanted nothing more than to curl up and cry. But her people needed hers, so she kept fighting. The battle lasted 4 more hours. The Vrakthi came in waves, testing different approaches, trying to find a gap in Maya's defenses. She used every trick she could think of to hold them off. She triggered flares to blind them at crucial moments. She had Reyes move from position to position, firing single shots to make it seem like there were more defenders than there actually were. She used the reflective emergency blankets to create false heat signatures that drew Vrakthi fire away from real targets when they ran out of ammunition. For the rifles, she had her people fall back to the shuttle wreckage where they could use the debris as weapons. Okonkwo collapsed from blood loss around midday, and Maya had to drag him to cover, while Reyes held off a pair of hunters with nothing but a combat knife and desperate courage. Tanaka passed out completely and did not wake up, his breathing shallow and weak. By afternoon, Maya was the only one still fighting. She had the dead Rakthi's blade in her good hand, a curved thing that felt wrong in her grip. And she stood over her fallen comrades like a guardian spirit refusing to yield. The Rakthi had pulled back to regroup, but she could see them gathering in the tree line, more of them than before. Dozens of hunters preparing for a final assault. Her beacon was still broadcasting, but no help had come. Maybe no one had heard it. Maybe no one was coming. Maya looked at her people, unconscious and dying around her. And she made a decision: if this was the end, then she would make it count. She would take as many of the enemy with her as she could. She would show them what humans were made of. The Rakthi began their final advance. Maya raised her stolen blade and prepared to die, and then she heard Ida sound like thunder rolling across the sky, growing louder and louder until it drowned out everything else. She looked up and saw dropships. Terran dropships, 5 of them descending through the clouds with their weapons blazing. Rakthi scattered as plasma fire rained down on their positions. Marines in heavy armor leaped from the hovering craft before they even touched the ground, their rifles already firing, their war cries echoing through the jungle. Terran forces, a voice boomed from one of the dropships. Identify yourself. Maya dropped the alien blade and fell to her knees. She was crying. She realized, tears streaming down her face and mixing with the blood and dirt. Lieutenant Maya Chen, she called out, her voice cracking. Logistics Division, U.S. Avalon. 4 survivors requiring immediate medical attention. I caught him on her knees. Marine ran to her side and knelt beside her. His face was hidden behind his helmet, but his voice was kind. We heard your distress call, Lieutenant. It came through on the cargo channel of all things. Took us a while to figure out what was happening. Maya laughed. It was a broken sound, more sob than humor. But it was real. I modified the beacon, she said. It was the only frequency that was not jammed. The Marine was quiet for a moment. That was clever, he said finally. That was very clever, Lieutenant. Medical teams swarmed the crash site. They loaded Okonkwo and Tanaka and Reyes onto stretchers and carried them to the dropship. Simeon wrapped a blanket around Maya's shoulders and someone else examined her wrist, and someone else tried to get her to eat something. She refused the food. She just sat there watching her people being carried to safety, watching the Marines secure the perimeter, watching the Rakthi hunters flee into the jungle. She had done it somehow. Impossibly, she had done Ida. Logistics clerk had held off an alien army for almost 20 hours with nothing but flares and fire extinguishers and the skills she learned pushing paper in a cargo bay. She started laughing again, and this time she could not stop. The Marine who had found her sat down beside her and waited patiently until the laughter faded into exhausted silence. The rescue team found 11 Rakthi bodies around your perimeter, he said. 11 kills, Lieutenant. That is more than most combat veterans manage in their entire careers. Maya shook her head. I only killed 2 of them myself, she said. The others died in traps or were shot by my people. Your traps, the Marine said. Your positions, your strategy, your command. Those kills belong to you, Lieutenant, whether you pulled the trigger or not. Maya did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. She just sat there in the blood-soaked jungle of an alien world and watched the sun set through the smoke. She was alive, her people were alive, and somewhere out there, on the other side of the galaxy, her desk was still waiting for her in Cargo Bay 7's. She wondered if she would ever see it again. The debrief lasted 3 weeks. Maya sat in conference rooms and medical bays and officers' quarters while dozens of different people asked her the same questions over and over again. How did you end up on that shuttle? How did you survive the crash? How did you modify the beacon? How did you hold off the Rakthi for almost 20 hours with no combat training? She told the truth every time. She had pressed the wrong button and boarded the wrong shuttle. and ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. Everything that followed was just her trying not to die. The officers who interviewed her did not seem to believe it could be that simple. They kept looking for hidden depths, for secret training, for some explanation that made more sense than a logistics clerk accidentally becoming a war hero. But there was no hidden depth. There was just Maya Chun, a woman who was very good at managing resources and solving problems, and refusing to give up when things got hard. Those skills had served her well in Cargo Bay 7. They had served her even better on Nexion 4 Sergeant. Okonkwo survived his wounds and was expected to make a full recovery. He visited Maya in the medical bay on the Avalon 3 days after their rescue, and he brought her flowers. Real flowers from the ship's hydroponic garden that must have cost him a month's pay. "You saved my life, Lieutenant," he said. "You saved all our lives. I wanted to thank you properly." Maya did not know what to say. She had just done what needed to be done. "You held off the Vrakthi while I worked on the beacon," she said. "You bought me the time I needed." "We saved each other, Sergeant." Okonkwo smiled at that. "Maybe so," he said. "But I've been in combat for 12 years, and I've never seen anyone do what you did with so little. You have a gift, Lieutenant, even if you do not know it yet." Private. First Class Reyes came to see her too. The young woman was quieter than before, her eyes still haunted by what she had seen. But there was steel in her now that had not been there before. "I froze," Reyes said, "when the shuttle crashed. I just shut down and you brought me back. You gave me something to do and someone to follow. And that saved me, Lieutenant." "You fought well when it mattered," Maya told her. "That is what counts." Corporal Tanaka was in worse shape. His legs had been crushed beyond repair, and the doctors said he would never walk again without cybernetic replacements. But he was alive, and that was more than anyone had expected. He sent Maya a message from his hospital bed on Kepler Station. "I told you to leave me behind," the message said. "I am glad you did not listen." "Thank you, Lieutenant. I owe you a drink when I get my new legs." Maya read the message 3 times and then saved it to her personal files. She would hold him to that drink. The real surprise came 2 weeks after the rescue, when a commander from Fleet Intelligence requested a meeting. His name was Torres, and he had cold eyes and a cybernetic hand that clicked when he moved his fingers. "We intercepted some interesting Vrakthi communications after the battle," he told Maya. "They were discussing the engagement at your crash site." Maya felt her stomach tighten. What did they say? Torres smiled, but there was no warmth in it. They reported facing a Terran tactical specialist of unusual cunning who had turned a simple crash site into a fortress. They requested reinforcements specifically to deal with you, Lieutenant. 2 full hunting packs were diverted from the main assault on Firebase Delta because of your actions. Maya blinked. "I am not a tactical specialist," she said. "I am a logistics clerk." "I know," Torres said. "That is what makes this interesting. You disrupted Vrakthi operations across an entire sector by accident. Do you understand what that means?" Maya shook her head. "It means you have skills that we need," Torres said. "Skills that we did not know could be applied to combat situations. I would like to offer you a position in Tactical Support Division." "I do not want to be a soldier," Maya said immediately. "I am not cut out for combat." "Nobody is asking you to be a soldier," Torres said. "We are asking you to do what you already do. Manage resources and solve problems and find solutions that nobody else can see. We just want you to do it for the people on the front lines instead of the people in the cargo bays." Maya thought about it for a long time. She thought about her desk in Cargo Bay 7 and the quiet routine of requisition forms and shipping manifests. She thought about Okonkwo bleeding in the jungle and Reyes staring at nothing and Tanaka trapped under the wreckage. She thought about the 20 hours she had spent fighting for her life with nothing but flares and fire extinguishers and the skills she had learned pushing paper. "I will think about it," she said. The ceremony was held in the main hangar of the Avalon. Maya stood at attention in her dress uniform while hundreds of crew members watched and cameras broadcast the event across the fleet. Admiral Vance was an old man with white hair and a face like weathered stone. He had been fighting the Vrakthi since the first contact, and he had seen more death than anyone should have to see. But when he looked at Maya, there was something in his eyes that might have been respect. "Lieutenant Maya Chun," he said, "for extraordinary heroism in combat against enemy forces, for leadership under fire, for resourcefulness in the face of overwhelming odds, I award you the Silver Star." He pinned the medal to her chest, and the hangar erupted in applause. Maya stood there feeling the weight of the small silver star against her uniform and wondering how her life had changed so completely in just 3 weeks. Afterward, the Admiral pulled her aside for a private word. "Lieutenant Chen," he said, "you took a wrong turn and waged a one-woman logistics war against the Vrakthi. Dominion Command has been discussing what to do with you." Maya felt her stomach drop. "Sir, we are promoting you to Lieutenant Commander," Vance said. "Tactical Support Division needs someone who can think like you do, someone who can see solutions where others see only problems." He paused, and something that might have been a smile crossed his weathered face. "Also, we are updating our shuttle boarding procedures." Apparently, they were insufficient. Maya felt laughter bubbling up in her chest. She fought it down and managed a crisp salute. "Thank you, sir," she said. "I will do my best." "I know you will," Vance said. "That is why we are giving you the job." Maya walked back to her quarters after the ceremony. Her silver star gleamed on her chest, and her new rank insignia felt strange on her collar. She passed Cargo Bay 7 on her way and stopped to look through the windows at her old desk. Someone else was sitting there now, a young ensign who was frowning at a datapad full of requisition forms. Maya watched him for a moment and felt a strange mixture of nostalgia and relief. She had loved that job. She had been good at that job, but she was good at other things too. Things she had never known about herself until a wrong button press sent her to the Warfront. She turned away from the window and walked toward her new office in the Tactical Support Division. The war against the Vrakthi was not over. There were still battles to be fought, and lives to be saved, and problems to be solved. Maya Chun was ready. She had faced the worst the galaxy could throw at her, and she had survived. She had protected her people with nothing but her wits and her will and her refusal to give up. She had earned her medal. Now it was time to earn the next one, because that was what humans did. They adapted. They survived. They found a way, and Maya Chun had found her way at last. She had walked onto the wrong shuttle and into the wrong war, and somehow she had come out the other side as something new, something stronger, something ready. The stars were waiting, and Maya Chun was ready to meet them, one requisition form at a time.